Hello everyone and welcome to Fall 2021. This is the Convocation video for English 2210. I'm going to try to keep it pretty quick, but there are some new things that I'm sharing in this video with you. So first of all, here's our little agenda for this video. I'm going to review the SLOs, which if you've watched these videos in the past, you'll be familiar with their two formats. I'm going to share some information about the portfolio. I'm going to review the pool of assignments that you have to choose from, and I'm going to review the number of major writing assignments, and I'm going to talk a little bit about SWA's small writing assignments. We're going to look at a sample prompt for the reflective memo and the portfolio. We'll talk about the textbook. We'll discuss outcomes reflections, project reflections, and SOGCs. I will mention a sample scaffolded sequence. I'm going to talk specifically about 2210 in the COVID era, discuss this assessment for this semester, and have a few concluding remarks. So here are the SLOs in their full form. As I mentioned, every semester, these are articulated for professors, instructors, administrators, usage. So this has a lot of information about how this course touches upon some of the required New Mexico HED demands, but students don't care about that, so you don't need to include that. This, however, is the version that you will include in your syllabi. So make sure that you have this table somewhere in your syllabi and in your online Learn platform so that students can access it, and so that when you're teaching to the SLOs, you can refer to it. These were written in a student-centric way. I teach to them directly and we refer to them directly, and they do make sense once you sort of deconstruct them with students. So the point of that sort of cross-articulation between the language for educators and the language for students is to satisfy the HED's requirement that all universities in the state system that have the course English 2210 Technical Writing are able to transfer across state institutions. And that is the reason why they have that articulation, if you were curious about that. Okay, so the big showpiece of the technical writing core curriculum class is the portfolio. We use an online multimodal portfolio in this class. Now, building this portfolio will be new to almost all of your students. Many of them will have an experience from their freshman writing sequence of building an online portfolio, but it will vary a bit, especially in terms of contents when they build it in English 2210. Some students won't have that first year writing, first year composition, FYC experience with it, so it'll be brand new to them. In the past, we required Google Sites usage, and we had a template for that. So if you haven't taught this class in a few years, what's new is we've taken out that template from the course, and you need to take out the building your portfolio using Google Sites video, because we're not doing that anymore. Students have used all different kinds of what you see is what you get tools for building websites, including Wix, Weebly, WordPress, and the new Google Sites. If you've taught this class before and you've gotten students permission, you can share previous students' examples with your current students, and that is hugely helpful. Give your students the empowerment to look up their own answers to questions that they have about building out the web interface and hosting documents on their site that they have. You can answer questions for them if you know the answers, but you need to require of them that they look for answers first. There's tons of YouTube tutorials, and I use them all the time. I know you guys use them all the time too. None of us are probably experts on all of these different utilities for building a web portfolio. So all students at UNM have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud, and we have a teaching allocation grant currently that is providing our TAs, some of them who are working on this grant, with an opportunity to become experts in these utilities, and they are providing tutorial videos for us in workshops last semester. So keep your eyes open for some more of these workshops this semester. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that encouraging your students to use the Creative Cloud utilities is smart since they get that all for free. And it really fits into our mandate within the 2210 course that students create a web-based multimodal portfolio. Now, when it's time to submit at the, after the end of the semester has arrived, when you need to submit a portfolio to Susan McAllister, our core writing administrative assistant, one of your portfolios for assessment, all you need to do is share the URL. You do not need to share a PDF of a student's portfolio, so it's just the URL. Okay, so what I do in week 3 is share examples of students' past web portfolios, and I've gotten permission from all of these students, so it's totally above board. I suggest you do the same thing. Nothing helps students more with learning how to do this web-based portfolio than having previous students' examples to look at, and we refer to these constantly almost every week. So one of the biggest problems, which occurred in 2 of the 3 of the samples that I have here, and then I include a few more later in the semester, but the Google Sites samples and the ones that your students will submit to you have problems with permissions. It's really hard to get students to figure that out sort of universally across their site. Now, if they're using some of the Creative Cloud tools, they don't have this problem. If they're using Wix and Weebly, they don't have this problem. You could ask your students to avoid Google Sites, but you might want to just help them avoid the permissions problem. So here's the menu of assignment choices. I have these listed here in the order that they occur in my class, and I have asterisks beside the ones that I use in my class. I do an instruction set, I do a complaint and response letter with social media component, and I do an extensive proposal report with an online presentation. Then everybody has to do the portfolio and cover letter along with a resume and bio statement. Now, this year, our annual assessment is changing. So this academic year, we are doing 3 slows as opposed to 2. So your students are going to write about all 9, and the e-comp versions of 2210 have them broken up 3, 3, and 3, and I just use that structure in my face-to-face classes as well. 3 slows for the first MWA, 3 for the next, 3 for the third, and then for their final reflection, they talk about all of them often, but they specifically dwell on a few, the ones that we're assessing for. This time around, it's 2, 6, and 7, project analysis, visual communication, and reviewing and editing. So if you mentioned in your portfolio prompt that we were going to ask them to specifically address 2 and 9, which were the previous ones, you need to change that to 2, 6, and 7. Now, again, the portfolio is mandated for all sections, but there are lots of other things that you'll have in your class. I have here a table that shows how I have the value distributed in my class. Yours might look different. I have the major projects, I have small writing assignments, I have peer review, I have the resume and bio statement, final portfolio quizzes, and class participation and attendance. Now, Shanae generously years ago created a bank of quizzes. I still use that, though I've modified many of them myself. You might want to do the same thing, but she said in previous years that she was happy to share those, so I'm assuming that's still the case, and let me know if you're interested in those. So the big feature of the class is the reflective memo and the cumulative portfolio. I set aside 3 weeks at the end of the semester to dedicatedly work on that, although we're working on it all semester long. This is my prompt from a few years back, and I know you can't read it in this video, but it will be shared on our Canvas site for core writing. I have to go in and change the language to reflect that we're talking about slows 2, 6, and 7. You'll see down here I just mentioned 2 and 9. But I have done some different things in this portfolio prompt, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit here. So I have a video here that coaches students on writing a reflection memo, and I'm happy to share this with you. But on the previous page, you'll see that I have 2 little arrows here. Arrow 1 concerns the memo, which is this reflection, and it's a pretty unique genre, and students struggle with it a bit. Arrow 2 is an item that I have added to my 2210 classes that we do in week 14. It's a single project immersive revision. So you can read that detail in my portfolio prompt. You do not have to do that, but everyone does have to do the reflection and the portfolio. I just find that if we work for a whole week after their 3 MWAs are graded and they've had time to think about them, and they work really concertedly on that revision, it helps to assemble a lot of their learning at the end of the term, in addition to doing their final portfolio. Hang on one second. There we go. So here's our textbook. Same as previous years. You need to enable the Red Shelf tool. If you have any trouble with that in your Learn course, let me know and I'm happy to help you. We use the ebook, not the Revel edition. That's important to know. And all of your students are charged for this book through their bursar's account. So it's really important that they don't opt out of getting the book. It's already in the course, and it's just very tricky. So this is important to cover at the beginning of the semester. If any students have any questions about that, they get an email that says that the only way they don't have to pay for it is if they decidedly and deliberately opt out, which very few students do. Okay, so reflection, there's all kinds of reflection that happens in a 2210 course, as there are in our other core writing courses. So you'll be doing sort of small reflections throughout the semester, but then they'll be doing major reflections on all of the slows as aligned with each MWA. So I do slow reflections in the discussion board that then they provide feedback to each other on in the sort of back and forth of a discussion board. In a face-to-face class, we workshop these in small groups. Then they also do a project reflection, and I have to train students to understand the difference between these slow reflections and the project reflection. So if any of you have questions about that, I'm happy to talk to you about it as well. Of course, the major reflection is the end of the semester 2-page memorandum, which we work on really carefully in the class. And I'm imagining many of you who've taught this class for years do the same. So I want to show this quickly. I've shown this for several years. This is one of my sequences. It's the complaint and response letter series with social media component. I've developed this to directly take on racially motivated and social justice issues that have been dominating news cycles both on our campus, in our state, and in our nation. So I wanted to make the work that my students do respond directly to some of these scenarios. Historically, I've used the UNM seal, the Zimmerman Library murals, and various other things on a more national scale. So here's my assignment. It's very verbose because this is for a fully online max class, so I provide a lot of details in the prompt, but they have to write 2 letters and include a social media series, which is a back and forth on Twitter, on Instagram, or Facebook. And I'm happy to share examples from students whose work I have permission to share of what this looks like. But it's a pretty solid assignment, and I've just sort of modified it over the years. Now, this assignment incorporates many slows. It specifically attended to project planning, project analysis, and content development. Project analysis is probably the most obvious one that it takes on just by its very nature. Now, this semester, again, we're starting with 3 different slows. Well, one of them's the same, but we're adding slow 6 and 7 and replacing 9. So slows 2, 6, and 7 will be the slows we focus on for our in-house program assessment, but the larger assessment now is taken care of by the university. So when you submit your portfolio to Susan McAllister, what becomes of it is it goes into this university assessment scheme. So during the COVID pandemic, which we are still experiencing, I encourage you, as do my colleagues in core writing, to be as patient and understanding as you can. I've also changed some of the content of my class to give students an opportunity to write about and analyze some of the professional and technical communication that is concomitant with the pandemic that we are living through. There's a lot of data visualization, there are a lot of reports and white papers, and students have the opportunity to look at those as very context-specific technical communication incidences. However, some students are really burnt out about living through this and talking about it, so you want to be sure to give your students options. Another thing that's really important relative to the pandemic era is that we need to incorporate specific language in our syllabi, and the provost's office has written to us with that language. So in the email that accompanied you receiving this video, I attached that sample syllabus, so be sure to incorporate that language in yours. Also, you need to meet with all of your students by the end of week 5. 2210 is a core writing class, and Associate Provost Pamela Cheek is very insistent and dedicated to serving our students in the best way possible. And to do that, meeting with them in individual conferences is a big help. So make sure that by the end of week 5, you've had individual conferences with all of your 2210 students. Be sure that all of your students in your face-to-face classes are masked. That is a mandate on our campus. So if you need any help with enforcing those rules, in addition to what was covered in the general convocation, please reach out to me. Okay, so that was a pretty quick run through of what's going on in 2210. So there are a few changes, and there's a lot that's remained the same. I want to just take a moment to thank you all for being so dedicated to technical and professional writing at UNM. And if you're super dedicated and interested in it, as I am, I hope you'll take a moment with your students to remind them that we have a minor in TPC and we have a certificate. There's a link in this Google slide deck to the tables that show what students need to take to complete those. And I'm always happy to visit classes virtually or in person to talk about those options. If you have any questions at all, reach out to me. And if you'd like a classroom observation virtually or in person this semester, also reach out to me. Thanks so much for all you do.